Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Recent comments by U.S. President Donald Trump suggesting that the U.S. should take over and long-term own the Gaza Strip have sparked significant debate. These remarks come amidst the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, which has brought global attention to Gaza's future and the broader Israeli-Palestinian issue. The proposal raises important questions about sovereignty, international law, and the U.S. role in the Middle East. How should we assess the feasibility of the idea along with its legal and ethical implications? How have different parties reacted to this proposal? And does this idea reflect the Middle East policies the Trump administration is likely to pursue in the next 4 years? Join us for today's discussion. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Sharmine Narwani, Editor-in-Chief of the Cradle, Benjamin Norton, Founder and Editor-in-Chief of the Geopolitical Economy Report, and Wang Jin, Director of the Center for Israel Studies at Northwest University. So Sharmine, I will start with you. I want to have your initial response to such an idea of the U.S. Taking over Gaza.
I think it just goes to show that even though he's had a first term already, that U.S. President Donald Trump has no nuanced understanding of this region and the various players and actors and states that are vested in this issue. He not only in a blanket way violates all international law and international norms and treaties that have existed since World War II, but he makes a proposal that includes some of his allied states in the region, without considering their own domestic situations and their own geopolitical dynamics in West Asia. So it's a non-starter. If he was a president who knew better, he would never make a statement like this. No party is going to, no international body is going to accept the U.S. takeover and running of Gaza. No international party is going to accept the forced displacement of 2 million people who have, largely been genocided for the last 15 months into their countries. It's just not feasible. So really, it's amazing that we give so much oxygen to a statement like this, because obviously even the White House backtracked a bit from it. But it seems that Trump has doubled down on his initiative, on his crazy vision during his recent meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah, trying to fine-tune the details of something that is a non-starter. It's impossible to implement.
That is right, Ben. Most of the people, the first reaction would be, this must be a joke. This is not serious. But when you take a look, Trump, it seems like he's serious about taking over Gaza. And where is this idea from?
Well, it's his colonialism. Unfortunately, this is a region that has a long history of Western colonialism going back to Sykes-Picot, in which the British and the French empires carved up the region. And today we see Donald Trump, not only threatening Gaza, but threatening Greenland, the Panama Canal, even his northern and southern neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So this is simply colonialism. There are also economic interests. Something that Trump hasn't even been hiding. Of course, Trump is himself a real estate developer, and he's been constantly floating the idea of building luxury real estate in Gaza on the Mediterranean. So it's a combination of, corporate corruption and greed and colonialism. And what's even more incredible is that in his first term, a lot of Trump's policy in West Asia, especially regarding Palestine-Israel, was overseen by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who doesn't have a formal position in his second administration now. But Jared Kushner last year gave an interview at Harvard University in which he also floated the possibility of ethnically cleansing Gazans. He said it should be cleaned out, which is, that is ethnic cleansing. He said the term clean. And then he said that they should build real estate on the waterfront property. So of course, this is not entirely new. We see that this is bipartisan in the U.S., that there is this support for Israel and opposition to any basic human rights for Palestinians, and support for Israel's colonization of Palestinian territories, including the expansion of settlements, against international law in the West Bank. But Trump, he simply says everything. I mean, he doesn't even have a pretense of abiding by international law or respecting human rights.
Wang Jin, as a scholar doing research of this region, do you see any possibility of such an idea becoming true? Previous discussion, a lot of people would dismiss such an idea. It's just impossible, out of nowhere. But gradually, some people say, what if Trump will just get serious and he will do that? As he's the head of the most powerful country. He probably could do that.
I think we are very clear that both legally and realistically, and Donald Trump's administration's announcement over the Gaza Strip is baseless. Because actually, on the one hand, his announcement will be strongly rejected, not only from the international community, but actually will be strongly rejected and criticized by the Palestinians themselves. Because when we're talking about so-called clean the Gaza Strip or so-called take over Gaza Strip, we have to also ask the willingness of the Gaza people, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, whether or not they are willing to transfer the land of the Gaza Strip to the hands of the United States. And also, on the other hand, we have to know that realistically, when really that maybe Donald Trump hopes to do something about this his announcement or about his ideas, but that means that we're talking about not only the 2 million, more than 2 million people, their new areas and their new homes in Egypt, in Jordan, and other Arab states. We also have to talk about maybe millions or billions or maybe tens of billions or hundreds of billions of US dollars investment and the money that should get collected from not only from the United States themselves, but also from the Gulf Arab states, or whether or not they have the willingness to invest into this region. So actually, it is very, very, I think his idea maybe sounds like new or sounds like to show that Donald Trump has interest in this area, but I don't think it's really realistic or legally based legally meaningful for this region, because it is too difficult or impossible to actually implement such a new idea in the Gaza Strip without the willingness of the local people, particularly the Arab states' willingness.
But here's a question, Wang Jin. In the recent meeting with the Jordan king, obviously, Trump spoke in front of the king. We basically give you a lot of money, and it's a time for you to do something for us, like like $1.5 billion. And Jordan, obviously, they need that kind of money. What if Washington pressured Jordan into basically, gave in, to do what we need you to do?
Yes, I think, yes, you're right. Jordan needs money urgently because, as the Arab states, one of the most, maybe the countries with financial difficulties, the Jordan always needs money, needs the money transfer from the other states into into his government. But the problem is that Jordan, on the one hand, money might talk, but on the other hand, Jordan also has to take a lot of other factors into their political consideration, particularly over the Palestinian issue. Because when really, for example, maybe hundreds of thousands of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, they were forced to be transferred into the Jordan territory, it will lead to the other major political crises and political uncertainties inside the country. Because in history, we know that the Palestinian rivalries and the Palestinian revolt forces inside the Jordan territory could become the very major challenge to the Jordan's internal stability and the political authority. So that is why I think from the Jordan's perspective, money may talk. Money will, of course, influence Jordan's political decision-making circle. But on the other hand, the more importantly, that something that more matter that should become would be the Jordan's consideration over its own political stability and political unity inside their own country. So that is why I think maybe Jordan will not openly reject Donald Trump's talks or Donald Trump's idea, but I think in reality, Jordan will strongly reject and resist the pressure from the United States.
Sharmine, obviously Trump was looking at Jordan and Egypt. What about Egypt? Will Egypt, in any sense, Egypt also received the U.S. money, right? In any sense, say, give in and accept such an idea?
I think Egypt is in I mean, economically, it's in just as devastating a position as Jordan is, possibly even worse, because Egypt's population is, I think, over 90 million now, whereas Jordan's is 6 million. By the way, just an aside on Jordan, over 60% of Jordan's population is Palestinian already. Okay. So to put in another million or two will completely change the Jordanian state. It will not be, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And that is an Israeli desire from decades to create an alternative Palestinian state in Jordan. I think Egypt's position may be strengthened by the fact that it is now a member of the BRICS. It does have alternatives to the measly, $1-2 billion it gets from the Americans every year. It needs to, this is a moment in West Asia and North Africa where we might see countries that have largely been in the US sphere of influence, heavily in the US sphere of influence, literally switch sides overnight because they're forced to. I think Trump is, I don't think he particularly cares, but he's actually forcing people to make a shift away from the United States at a time where there is a second pole in the world. We're no longer in a unipolar global order. There is a second pole in the world. And as we know, Egypt has played with the Russians and the Chinese in different spheres, just as the Saudis and the Emiratis have, staunch US allies. This may be the kind of trigger to force a further shift away. So I in some bizarre way, I welcome Trump's complete lack of consideration for regional actors and making such a ridiculous proposal, because I think many states will realize that they need to investigate their other options very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. I don't think Trump can force anything in Egypt. I think his focus will be in Jordan, because that is, another thing that the Israelis want, and what Trump's biggest donors, want is the annexation of the West Bank. There's even more Palestinians there. Okay, West Bank borders Jordan's territory. The idea, and they've already displaced 30,000 people in the West Bank over the last 21 days. So, that trend is continuing. And so I think the goal would be to displace en masse West Bankers into Jordan, and then eventually find a corridor for Gazans to be forced into Jordan as well, and change the nature of the Jordanian state fully. And Jordan has no recourse, because it is only cited. It doesn't have any alliances outside of the U.S. alliance, and so it has no way to threaten back or to push back on this. And who knows? Maybe the Saudis will write off Jordan. Because it's become so insignificant in the region. But I think this is the bigger threat, the threat of what will happen to Jordan with West Bank annexation, and mass displacement from the West Bank, and then Gaza. But I don't think Egypt is. I think Egypt is a stronger position to push back against Trump.
Mm-hmm. Ben, if you look at the Trump idea, ridiculous it is. He also talked about taking over Greenland, Canada, the 51st state of the United States, things like that. Remember in his inaugural speech, he made it seriously part of his mission to expand U.S. territory. Is this somehow in line with his idea of, expanding the U.S. territory to make the country greater again?
Yeah, well, again, this is simply colonialism. It's imperialism. And what's funny is in his inauguration speech, he also said that he would oppose war. But apparently, when he says he opposes war, he really means that he doesn't want to have a war with a large power that could actually fight back. Instead, he only wants war against small countries and territories that aren't able to defend themselves, and that the U.S. can simply colonize with no consequences. And so in the case of Greenland, it's clear that the U.S. state media outlets have openly said that the U.S. wants to expand their military presence there in order to counter Chinese and Russian forces naval ships in going through the Arctic, especially as climate change gets worse and worse. I mean, Trump said, drill, baby, drill. He denies climate change. And so as the Arctic starts to melt, the U.S. wants to militarize the region and wants to use Greenland. They also want to use Greenland to exploit its natural resources, in particular, its rare earth minerals. In the case of the Panama Canal, I mean, this is one of the most important trade routes on Earth. And Trump says he wants to take it over in violation of a treaty that the U.S. signed with Panama that makes it clear that the Panama Canal belongs to the people of Panama. It's the sovereign territory of Panama. And now with Gaza, I mean, this is in some ways even crazier because it came out of nowhere, and he has no real plans for this. I mean, I agree, like Sharmine said, this is just a crazy idea. He just floats out there. He has no way of actually implementing this. If he tries to force U.S. allies in the region to do this, it will likely lead to the fall of those regimes. I mean, let's keep this in mind. The Jordanian monarchy, it has to provide at least some kind of popular legitimacy. If they participate in the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, the people of Jordan will probably overthrow the government. I mean, I'll be real here. I mean, we saw what happened in Egypt just over a decade ago. The people of these countries, overwhelmingly, almost 100% of people support the Palestinians. Now, there are many governments that have, because of their alliances with the United States, they have really not done anything to concretely support the Palestinian people. But if they're seen as being complicit in the mass ethnic cleansing, it will lead to very serious consequences in Jordan, in Egypt. So it's in their own, self-interest to at least look like they're pushing back against this.
Well, Ben, if you look at the U.S. traditional policy, U.S. is one of the many countries that are supportive of the two-state solution. One Israelis and another, of course, the Palestinians. Well, we are not there yet. Probably it's a very remote idea. But anyway, the international community is of the consensus. We need a two-state solution. But with this idea of taking over Gaza by the U.S., what's the impact on that kind of pursuit, by the international community?
Well, it clearly violates international law, and it also makes it clear, something that we've known for a long time, that unfortunately the U.S. government has not supported the two-state solution. This is something that rhetorically it has said that it supported.
On the surface.
Yeah, but we've also seen that throughout administration, I mean, not just under Trump, we saw under Biden and under Obama and under Bush, the massive expansion of illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. You cannot create an actual Palestinian state when you have this Swiss cheese territory in the West Bank where a huge part of it is controlled by Israel. I mean, it's all controlled by Israel, essentially. It's occupying it. But you have entire parts of the West Bank that have been colonized in the creation of these little settlements, and they keep growing and expanding. And now Israel's building more settlements in occupied Syrian territory. I mean, all of this violates international law. So what happens is that the U.S. publicly claims they want a two-state solution, but every time there's a resolution in the UN Security Council, the United States vetoes it. We saw this when, for instance, there was a call for the ending of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territory. We saw this recently when there was a decision made by the International Court of Justice. We saw this when there was a vote in the UN Security Council to accept Palestine as a full member state of the United Nations. The U.S. used its veto power in the UN Security Council in all of those cases to oppose resolutions. So publicly, Washington says one thing, but then it actually, when it comes to its actions, it does something different. And now Trump is making it clear that they never really were committed to creating a Palestinian state, or at least they'll be fine with the Palestinian state as long as it's in another country's territory, as long as Israel can colonize all of historic Palestine.
Wang Jin, we know, people are discussing this crazy idea. The reality is like, in Gaza, people are coming back, and there's a negotiation of the second phase of the ceasefire. So what do you see as the priority right now to really stabilize the situation, to solve the problem, at least temporarily, and help the people to come back to rebuild their homes?
I think the priority right now is to continue the ceasefire, because actually during the past week that Israel and Hamas, they showed some kind of signs that the ceasefire might not be continued, because from the perspective of Hamas, they blame Israel of attacking the Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip and blocking the Palestinian civilians going back home, and also trying to harass the humanitarian aid. The teams outside of the Gaza Strip into the territories in the Gaza Strip. So that is why, from the Hamas perspective, that Israel now is violating strongly and seriously of the ceasefire. So that is why during the past, at the very end of the last week, that Hamas decided to delay the free of the Israeli hostages taken by Hamas back to Israel, and then. Also, from the Israel perspective, the problem is more serious because actually, from Israeli perspective, they believe that they blame the Hamas is trying to humiliating the Israeli hostages before they were sent back to Israel, and also they also blame Hamas is trying to starve the Israeli hostages and to humiliate the Israeli own and international image. So that is why the two sides become more criticized against each other, and the two sides become now more hostile against each other. So that is why the atmosphere between the two sides over the next phase of the ceasefire talk is more and more negative, particularly given the fact that the two sides dialogue is not normally organized in Doha under the mediation of Egypt, the United States, and Qatar. So that is why I think, yes, we're talking about the peace prospect in the future. But right now, immediately, the most urgently needed thing that should be done is ceasefire continued. That is very thing that we should keep attention.
But then there's this question, Wang Jin, how will such an idea of the U.S. taking over Gaza affect the ceasefire negotiation? Somehow, will it somehow lead to the Israeli side probably to delay or to postpone or to refuse to accept probably any kind of ceasefire?
I think Donald Trump's idea is a very, very major blow to the positive idea of the continuing the ceasefire, because actually under the Donald Trump's perspective, now everything that should be done in the Gaza Strip under his plan will be in the favor of Israel rather than in the favor of Palestinian people, and will not be in the favor of Hamas as well as the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So that is why I think his plan, although in his plan, maybe from his idea, he hopes to define the Gaza Strip as a very area with the potential of economic development and tourism construction. But the plan that he put forward actually harms the confidence of Israelis and Palestinians over the future peace, and also will negatively influence the ongoing ceasefire that existed between the two sides. So that is why I don't think it is a very good time that Donald Trump pushed forward his plan, and actually his plan gave a very strong blow to the confidence and the willingness of the both sides between Israel and Hamas over the future peace.
Yes, Sharmine, of course, I think for any sensible people, they would say no to such an idea, such a move by the United States. But at the same time, we know that U.S. is the most powerful country. Trump has shown no respect for international law, norms, rules. But we do hear UN, EU, and many countries are critical of the idea. The UN basically said that moving the 2 million people to another place is basically ethnic cleansing. But is there anything the international community or the UN can do to stop Trump if he is serious with the idea?
I really don't know why we keep giving oxygen to his ridiculous statements, but at this point, it's a distraction from what's actually going on in Gaza, okay? The Israelis have made it clear from the prime minister to his cabinet that they want to restart the war in Gaza. Okay, we are seeing now that the stage 2 of ceasefire discussions have not only been delayed, but when the Israeli negotiators have shown up in Doha, the Qataris have been very upset about this. The chief negotiators have been changed, and the current ones are not entrusted to make any decisions, as opposed to what it was in the first round. But what's happening on the ground is that Israel has been violating things every day. Now, the Americans are backing the Israeli narrative because Hamas has said Israel has violated the ceasefire, so we're not going to release the agreed upon hostages on Saturday as planned. And how has Israel violated the ceasefire? It's killed over 100 people in Gaza since the ceasefire. Okay, it is obligated under the phase one of the ceasefire to send in 50 fuel trucks a day. It only sends in 15. It has been obligated in stage one of the ceasefire to send in 60,000 mobile homes. It has sent 0. It's obligated under the first phase of the ceasefire to send in 200,000 tents for people who have no homes anymore, no structures to return to. It has sent 20,000 tents. You know, it is the Israelis who have been violating the ceasefire. You really, I mean, being based here in Beirut, you don't have to look further than the ceasefire Israel struck with Lebanon to see how Israel violates every single day. We have had upward of 1,500 noted violations of the ceasefire by the Israelis specifically. You know, the bombing of homes, using fighter jets to bomb areas in Lebanon, using drones to target areas, and of course killing civilians regularly, as well as killing members of the Lebanese armed forces. So it's Israel that's violating all these things. Really is Trump's ridiculous statement not just a distraction from the fact that Israel is violating its obligations and there won't be a phase two, and that Israel is dying to return back to war? You know, I think we're getting diverted deliberately from the real issues at hand.
As a distraction. Well, with that, we're coming to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.